Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, the East Bay's best podcast. Hosted by Jared Ash, bringing you in-depth conversations with the leaders shaping your community.
Today, we're going to be talking about organ donation, its impacts, and the need here in the greater Bay Area. We're joined by two special guests today, Maggie Jacobs, who is an advocate and organ donor impacted directly by family who have received an organ transplant. And our second guest is Bob Linscheid, who is the father of someone in need of a kidney transplant. And he's going to talk about how that impacts the family and life and share their personal journey as well. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Good to be here. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks. Maggie, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you arrived in this space and being an advocate and passionate about organ transplants and learning about this?
Absolutely. 3 years ago, if you'd asked me anything about organ donation, transplant, I would have said, absolutely. I have that pink dot on my driver's license, which is incredible. And that's just a very small step to a world that I unfortunately discovered. In 2018, my husband was diagnosed with FSG. We were told by his doctors that he would require a kidney transplant within 6 to 10 years. That door came knocking, and that year things progressed very rapidly and his health declined very quickly. And in the state of California, depending on your blood type, the average wait for a deceased donor can take anywhere from 5 to 9 years, especially in the Bay Area. And watching my husband's health decline quickly, I knew we didn't have 5 to 9 years. And while dialysis is a life-sustaining treatment, it's not a therapy where you thrive in life necessarily. Most people don't. And I didn't want that life for him either. And we got the message loud and clear, go find a living donor. And that's what we did. And from the time he was listed, the transplant was just 6 months because we found a living donor.
Let's build on that story. How did you find someone? 'Cause
Initially,
that's part of it.
and I was flying blind through this process. I joined a lot of Facebook groups, did a lot of Google research, went down a lot of rabbit holes, but it's scary at the time. And I just started asking people. And I don't recommend that approach. It's like, hey, can I have one of your kidneys? Very close friends, obviously. I didn't do that broadly. And then I very quickly realized that approach is not going to work. And I had to reframe it. And what we did is we gave ourselves permission to share his story. And what I mean by that is I would never ask anybody, knowing what I know now, to go ask somebody else for a kidney. It doesn't work. I've tried that approach. It creates this unnecessary weirdness and pressure in the relationship that isn't helpful to anyone. Instead, we worked to create his story and share in a way that created an emotional connection so those that feel called to step forward would. And what did that look like? It was, here's what's happening to my husband. He's in kidney failure. He's a loving husband, brother, uncle. This is what his life looked like before. Very fulfilled, incredible contribution to our humanity. Here's what's currently happening. And here's what his life will look like for the foreseeable future, tethered to a machine while we wait for that phone call. And here's what it takes away. And when I look back, it's speaking to the pain that it caused, speaking to what he would miss out on, and then speaking to what he will do once he receives that living donor kidney, so he can get back to enjoying life. More birthdays, more weddings, just more connection. That's what we're here for. And it's one thing to say, hey, can I have your kidney, versus creating something that has meaning that people can see themselves in, and then they feel called to step forward.
That's important. And fast forward, he had this transplant, and how is he doing today?
October will be 2 years. When we went into that appointment, and that year he was walking with a cane because he was in so much pain. Fast forward, he just came back from Chicago. He was in a flag football tournament where he played 4 games in 2 days with people in their 20s and 30s. He's doing amazing.
That's a big shift. And talk a little bit about the dialysis.
Dialysis is a process that cleanses your blood via a machine because your kidneys are unable to do so at that point. But it's very taxing on the body. It's very taxing on the organs, and it causes a lot of other problems. And in that period of being on dialysis, it could be several months. And I've seen people up to on it 15 years. And your health does not improve while on dialysis. I often say today is the healthiest you will ever be on dialysis because it doesn't improve, it declines. And it's really important that people do get a transplant to ensure that they can get back to living.
And you were sharing how you told the story. How did you share it? Was it on social media? Was it asking friends to post? Was it through an organization?
All of the above. When people often ask me, what should I do? Where should I share? What does that mean? And I say, start with family, start with your friends, and then start with community. But a much broader and more impactful and far-reaching one is social media. And to the extent that anyone has social media, it doesn't matter which platform, use it. And my favorite one to use is LinkedIn. People will say, Maggie, that's a site for professionals. And I say, what are professionals? They're people. I just saw a post yesterday with somebody saying they have metastatic cancer and they need a liver donor. And people are out there and you have no idea the people that you can reach by doing that. And it's important to take as many approaches as you can to attract that people.
That makes sense. And glad to hear your husband's doing well and just how people get lost in the online community. And it's often talked about as it causes depression. There's the doom scrolling, that it isolates people, but you guys found the opposite within it. You found community and you found the human touch, and that the network arguably just helped create a smaller world, right?
Absolutely. And it's, if people will say, there's so much wrapped up in the idea of not sharing. People don't want to ask for help. They don't want to receive help. They don't want to be a burden. There's guilt, there's shame, there's embarrassment, there's fear of being judged at the idea of sharing. And there's this huge emotional wall that people have to break through. And I'll say, you don't even have to be comfortable in sharing. I just need you to share. You could stay in the discomfort, but you've got to move through it to at least share your story, because if you don't know, or if people don't know, they can't help.
And before we head over to Bob, Maggie, another question. You went out to this online community, but your family, it was your husband, you have other members of his family. Talk through your story about that and how you got tested a little bit and that process.
I was the first person to get tested for him, and I wasn't a match. And initially, it was devastating. I wanted to be his hero, and to hear that you're not a match, it's really heavy, because you think, what do I do now? And then he has a small family. His sister got tested, didn't work out. I don't think his dad got tested, but he's in his 80s, and we wouldn't ask that of him. Mm-hmm. But there was nowhere else to turn, and we knew we had to turn outward, and that's what we did.
Before you went out to the broader community and your friends and the world, you did start internally with you as the spouse, then you went to his sister, and there wasn't an immediate solution within the family. Yeah. And then you did a pay it forward. That's where we're going with this, is you decided you weren't done with just your husband being solved. You needed to do more.
Yep. I'd gotten far enough down the path and I'd already had my annual health maintenance tests. Be sure to get those if you're considering donating. But I was so far along, I thought, I know I want to do this anyway, regardless of the outcome, because there's so many people out there, 90 to 100,000 people that are waiting for a transplant. And once my husband received his and was healed, I said, I got my husband back. He got his life back. We got our future back. Like, how could I not do this for somebody else? And that's what I did. And I donated to somebody last year. And I wish I could do it 100 times over.
A lot of respect for doing that.
Thank you.
Let's pivot over to Bob for a minute. Bob, tell us your story. Why is this topic important to you? And how did you get involved in learning about this?
Thanks, Jared. And Maggie, always appreciate seeing you and hearing the story, even though I've heard it numerous times. It gives me and my family hope we can be on the same trajectory to a solution. My son's story, Johnny's 4 years old. He lives in the Chico area. Before we discovered he had kidney issues, Johnny worked on a farm in the rural area of Chico. Chico's rural enough as it is, but there's a lot of open space. And the fires, you may remember years ago in Paradise, my son lost his home in Paradise. And at the time, we were experiencing bad hair, and his eyes were bothering him. And I helped him get an appointment at a eye doctor's office. He went in and his blood pressure was 5/135, clearly stroke-like. They took him in to Enloe Medical Center and they discovered he had renal failure, kidney disease. They weren't sure why, but they began with a chest port giving him dialysis. And he's been on dialysis since August 25th, 2021. It'll be 5 years coming up this August. Dialysis began in its center at DaVita Center. Then he did home dialysis, which frankly it is, in my view, there needs to be a separation between your normal life and your medical life. We no longer do the home program. He does appointments. He does 4 days a week because he wants to get his blood clean. But as Maggie said, dialysis is not, it's just a short term. I've known Maggie's family for a long time. I actually got to visit Scott when he was in recovery at home after his surgery. It gave me hope that there was an opportunity for Johnny. And then I just kept up my communication with Maggie and heard their story additionally. And we're now working with CPMC, Sutter Health in San Francisco, to locate a donor. But in the meantime, Johnny had a heart issue, needs to be taken care of before he can have a transplant. But I used some social media encouragement from Maggie, and we began the process. And I know at least 5 people that have reached out saying they're within the protocol. And we have gone through cpmckidneydonor.org is the website, and we've referred, half a dozen to a dozen people to it. As Maggie indicated, when you do a donation, if you're not exactly a match, your loved one, you can give to the network and the network can help you. And she can explain a little bit more about that for how that worked for them. But right now we've started a major effort promoting that kidney donations are common, and let's not be limited by your blood type or thinking that, you're not a match. And so that's where I've been spending my time, helping Johnny locate a potential donor.
Maggie, do you want to share a little bit about that process, maybe?
Absolutely. When, I often get asked, well, what if I'm not a match to the patient, to the recipient? And I say that's perfectly okay. And in fact, when I advise people on sharing on social media, I say don't include your blood type, which you would think is counterintuitive. But if you include your blood type, every single person that knows their blood type, if it's not a match to that recipient, guess what? They're not going to complete the questionnaire to get tested. And you always want to cast as wide of a net as possible. Now, let's say a donor does come forth for Johnny, and I'm making up blood types here, but let's say Johnny's type O, which one of the most challenging to match, because O is the universal donor, but O can only receive O. And if you have an O recipient, there's a ton of other blood types. You've got A, B, B. None of those people can donate to the O. And if you have another recipient pair over here that's blood type A and they have an O donor, yes, that O donor could donate to that A. And if you share, hey, we have what's called the swap program, the exchange. We take these kidneys, we throw them in a pool. Obviously, this is not medical terms, but we throw them in a pool. And we want to find the best possible kidney for your body, because compatible doesn't mean best. And so you've got an incompatible pair over here and an incompatible pair over here, but you do a cross, or you can also create a chain if there's an altruistic donor that triggers one donation and it just goes through. And I know of one working on a 9-way chain right now. And there are options. And I don't want people to think just because I'm not a match, I can't donate. And then they also have what's called the voucher program. You're not donating a kidney to somebody, you're donating a kidney for somebody. And I can donate to an unknown person, and then in exchange, I get a voucher for somebody that I name.
What does this voucher mean?
I'm going to speak to it in terms of Johnny and Bob. Johnny's an O. It's important to note because we need O donors, and Johnny's an O, and he has, Jared, I'm going to use you. You want to donate to Johnny. And let's say you're blood type A. You can't donate to Johnny because Johnny can only receive type O. But if you donate to a paired kidney donation pool as an A, somebody that really needs an A, that's your same blood type, around the same age, same size, same tissue typing. In exchange, we're going to get an O out of that pool, or you're going to get a voucher and you're going to name Johnny as the recipient. When that O kidney comes available that matches Johnny, he gets it.
Okay. That's like a trading card game to dumb it down, right?
Yes.
That makes sense. I know we're not doctors in this group, we're advocates, we're telling personal stories. I just Googled it. There's 38% of the people out there are O type, O positive type people. Just using that, is there 38% of people then who would be a match for an O person, or is it's a really a smaller threshold in terms of things?
I don't know the specific number, but in my travels, I would tell you I see significantly more O recipients than any other blood type. And that's because it's the hardest, difficult to match, because they can only receive O's. See, blood type A can receive A and O, right? Because O is the universal donor. Blood type B can receive B and O. AB is the universal recipient. They can receive anything, but O is the universal donor. And that's why at hospitals, they need type O blood, because they use that in emergencies, because it can go to anybody, but they can only receive O. And so it's the hardest one to find.
Big and broad spread is this problem in the Bay Area and the country? I know we're talking about kidneys now. What can you share so we understand how many people out there are going through it, or how big of an issue is this? How much care is there for people?
I was just going to say that since our story has, and Maggie's helped us tell our story, in a very short period of time, I've heard from at least 8 people. Now, we don't share private health information. HIPAA is something that we know is a regulatory agency. We don't share private health information, but I know of at least 8 people that have said, I'm filling out the questionnaire. That doesn't mean that we're anywhere close, because we still have to deal with heart issue. Heart has to get settled, all the medical stuff settled before a transplant can take place. But Bubba Paris, former San Francisco 49ers, involved in an organ donor network. More and more people are reaching out saying, hey, I've heard your story. There have been several people that replied saying, hey, I've donated a kidney. My friend John Macaludis up in Chico, California, I had no clue, but he donated a kidney. A friend of mine that I went to high school with lives in Montana, came out to San Francisco, donated a kidney. These stories propel others to think what they can do in action. I'm at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo 2 weekends ago, and a person came up to say, hey, I had no clue. She saw it on Instagram. She filled out the forms and is being considered. We're seeing a lot more care and of individuals that want to contribute to saving a person's life. And that's the story we're trying to tell, is a donated kidney could save somebody's life. Now, a cadaver kidney, one from a dead person, can work, but if you want to last longer and function better, a living donor is the way to go. Everything we read about it tells me that's the strategy. That's what I'm seeing right now, Jared, and that's been less than a month. Hopefully we have the success that Maggie and Scott had.
Let me add on to that, just to provide a little bit of color.
Yeah.
Why do we talk about living donation? Deceased donation is incredible, and I'm not saying that don't do it, but the amount of people are added to the national list daily, annually, far exceeds those that provide deceased donor organs. And you've got to have living donation. And deceased donor kidneys, on average, last 10 to 15 years. Living donors last twice as long, 15 to 20 years. They start working right away. Deceased donors, the recipients, often need a couple sessions of dialysis. There can be what's called a sleepy kidney. They don't always start working right away. And living donors, they're coming from an exceptionally healthy individual, because anybody that's donating has to do a full medical workup of a lifetime. If there's anything to find in your body, doctors will find it and they will stop the process. And I think one thing we learned during the process, Bob, and this was particularly discouraging for me as we were looking, is our living donor coordinator said, Maggie, I need you to keep sharing your story, because for every 10 people that fill out the questionnaire, that is the health history that starts the process, only one person is viable as a donor. And they learned later at a conference, because of the proliferation of social media and sharing and the virality of it, it's now 1 in 20. And if you do the math in terms of casting a net, Bob, you said you have 8 people, that's less than one person that's potentially a viable donor. Now, I don't know the specifics of those people, but that's pretty jarring, right? It's just, and that's why we're here. That's the importance of continuing to share your story and get the message out. Not one person can do this alone. It truly takes a village.
I have some stats. That's 1 out of 20 is an interesting thing. I have also pulled up some stats from the National Institute of Health. I'm just going to share. In 2024, there were 27,060 kidney transplants performed in the US, a record at the time. However, the need was 90,000 Americans. So you are slightly less than a third. The waiting list pressure, just to amplify this, in 2024 is there's 143,982 people who are on that list. 10.7% of them have been waiting for 5 years or longer.
I'm going to add a few
Yeah,
more
please.
stats your way. And these aren't happy stats, but I think it's 12 or 13 people waiting on the list die every single day waiting for that transplant. And another one, it's hard to hear, but it's the mortality rate on dialysis. When you hit 7 years, you're at 100%. And anything else beyond 7 years is bonus time. And I've seen people 15, 20 years, but those are rare exceptions.
Bob, as you listen to those stats, as somebody who's going through this right now with your family, what's your sort of reaction to that?
It's motivating to do more every day, to inform others, talk to people on the phone. I get calls from folks I haven't heard from in years saying, tell me what's going on. How can I help? It's motivating in one standpoint, but it also is gratifying to know that people want to help and they just don't know what to do exactly. And that's why podcasts of this nature and work that Maggie has done as an advocate are so beneficial. I have 3 sons. This son probably is the one that could handle all of the issues of being burned out of a home in paradise and having end-stage renal failure, and because it can really affect your emotion and your mental health. And he is, while I'm helping to tell his story, he's pretty private about it. He doesn't want people to feel as though they have to donate, but in my view, it's not about asking somebody, as Maggie said, it's not about asking, hey, can I have one of your kidneys? It's about telling Johnny's story. And if you had an opportunity to save a person's life, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you do that? And that's what we're trying to do with this effort, is to tell a story, use social media. And the other thing is that people don't like generally asking for help, but when it's a life or death matter, things change. And I'm pretty proud of how Johnny's approaching this. But to Maggie's point, on Sunday, we had to take him to UC Davis to get a liver examination. Why? Maggie mentioned this. When you're doing dialysis, it affects other organs in your body. And the organ it impacts the most is the liver. Before they can go through the process of doing Johnny's transplant, his heart has to be in good working order, and his liver has to be in decent order. He spends a lot of his time going to the doctor just to make sure that he can accept the donation.
Talk a little bit more about life on dialysis. Is he able to do things? Is he able to work? Is he able to drive? I know we've talked about life sustaining, Maggie alluded to, but talk a little bit about his life and what he's able to do or not do.
Since August 25th, 2021, Johnny's been on Social Security. He can't work because he's got to do dialysis, which is a process that takes 4 to 5 hours, 4 days a week. And it's a life-sustaining process. It keeps him alive, but there's no way he could work. In his situation, he has to, his job is to stay alive. And he does the treatments 4 days a week. They do a lot of blood tests on him. The liver was the issue. It's easy for your body to become imbalanced chemically. He has to take binders when he eats food. It's a real regimented process to ensure that his body stays functional. And that's the daily life. He has Tuesdays off. He does dialysis Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. He has the weekends off. The initial application of dialysis was through a port in his chest. He had a fistula installed in his arm, and that's where the treatment takes place, where he uses needles into his arm 4 days a week, and it cleanses his blood. That's the regimen.
And that's a lot, right? Just to live each day. Is he able to play moments, take walks,
Yeah.
go to a baseball game, just coordinating his schedule around the treatments?
Normal life. He doesn't know what that is right now. As far as travel is concerned, Thanksgiving goes to Chico. Our family does, because he needs to be close to a DaVita center where he does his treatments. We're actually celebrating my birthday in September at a Raider game in Las Vegas. We fly out on Sunday morning, go to the game, and fly back, so he doesn't miss anything. We get to see a game together. His brother's going to fly in from Reno. We're going to enjoy it, but that's one day. And a couple of years ago, we sent him to do Thanksgiving in Reno. We loaded up an SUV with his machine and all the dialysis bags and needles and everything he needed. And of course, it snowed, which is why I rented him an SUV, so he was able to come out of the snow in Reno and get back for his normal treatment. But it's challenging. It's not normal life. You have to stay close to a treatment center, and we had a backup where for emergency he could go to a DaVita center in Reno.
DaVita centers are all over. I know there's one here in Walnut Creek, fortunately less than a mile from my house. There's in the Shadelands. I've got to imagine there's one in Las Vegas, but it's not a plug and play thing that you can use that to go by. You need your home base for the most part.
That's because it's such in high demand that in order to accommodate somebody from the outside, you'd almost have to plant somebody else. It makes it difficult.
Let me speak to the mental load of this. I mean, obviously there's a huge physical load, but mentally and emotionally, I remember my husband and I went through this process with him. He received a letter and there was a block of text, and I think it was 7 or 8 tests. It was EKG, CT scan, echocardiogram, all these different tests that you have to schedule and get cleared from before you can even get listed. And if you're not listed, most insurance companies won't pay for the living donor eval. And there's so many steps. And I remember that letter sat on our kitchen counter for probably a month or two. And I kept saying, Scott, when are you going to schedule these? When are you going to schedule these? And I really want to call out and acknowledge that for a patient to navigate this, it's incredibly difficult. Some are still working, others are not, but they're just trying to stay alive and keep an attitude of I can get through this. And sometimes that's even difficult. And I worked with my husband to schedule his appointments and get it all done. But, you'll often hear, well, they're lazy. They're not doing what they need to do. They're not interested. They're not motivated. And some of that may be true. There may be a level of apathy. They just don't want to deal anymore. But for the most part, they don't have the physical fortitude to push through and do these everyday things that will help them. And it's really important that they have family supportive network, friends who can step in and help where needed. And oftentimes, they won't know what to ask. And what's important, if you're a caregiver, if you're a supportive person in that recipient's life, to really say what's outstanding, what needs to be done, are you current on your appointments? And I think a lot of people fall through the cracks because they think they're waiting for a phone call, when in reality, there's so many outstanding tests that need to do. And with thousands of people on each list at each center, the nurse coordinators don't have time to check in with every single person. And you have to be your own advocate to not fall through the cracks.
It reminds me of an old cliche. You can't get a hit if you don't get in the batter's box. It's part of this process. You have to step up. But what I hear you saying in that is mentally, it's very easy to struggle with this thought going into your head and how it's changing life and doing all of these things.
And I would say there's also a level of denial on the patient's side, which is helpful in some regards, and others it holds you back. But in the way it held my husband back, it's mid 2024. He's like, oh yeah, this isn't going to happen until 2026. This isn't urgent. And as somebody who's watching him steadily decline, walking with a cane, moaning and groaning and just suffering, it's not 2 years away. And that's not a helpful level of denial, because you're having to navigate those conversations and essentially walk on eggshells. But the positive side of denial is he was so positive. And I think that's what really helped to carry him through every obstacle that we encountered. And healthy level of denial is helpful, assuming you have other people there to help navigate the process.
Bob, you want to add anything there?
No, I think she nailed it. There's nothing like personal experience to demonstrate that this is a way to make it happen. I'm confident that we'll be aggressive enough, if I can use the term, that we'll get somebody to come forward. But the first order of business is get him ready to accept a donation, and which means, admittedly, I'll share his health information. He has a valve in his heart that isn't operating totally effectively, and it was discovered by the cardiologist at CPMC Sutter Health. He has a cardiologist. They did not see it as serious as the physician there. We're going to get it taken care of, and we're in a protocol already to determine the best course of action for that. And I can't believe the technology that's available now, that you'd have to open up the heart, and now you go through a blood vessel to make some of those changes. It's been an education, believe me. It's far beyond what I thought. I thought kidney donation, I thought you took a kidney out and put one in. Nope, you don't take anything out. You add a kidney. That was the first myth that I discovered.
I guess I didn't even realize that until just now, too.
Yeah. His kidneys are operating at 5 to 7%. Thus, he needs dialysis, but another kidney will change his life. And he'll go back to work, and he'll be a part of society's paying unit.
And I know, to the audience, we've been focusing today on this personal story and an advocate story related to kidney. But if you have a recommendation for somebody with any organ issues, that would be great to follow up, or somebody that can talk a little bit more about how some of that technology and the treatment is changing too. Please send them our way. We're happy to share the story of how we can help people here, maybe not across the country or the globe, but at least we can help people here in the Bay Area and Northern California through our voices. And give us that website at CPMC one more time.
CPMCKidneyDonor.org.
Yep, that's the one. Hey, Jared.
Okay.
One thing I want to add that I think is applicable to anyone with a pulse. Kidney disease is the 9th killer in the United States, and oftentimes, to Bob's point, it's caught too late. And go get tested. Go do your lab workup, please. And I think the stat is 1 in 3 people in the U.S. will be impacted directly by kidney disease, and that's a staggering number. You're at 33%, 9th leading cause of death, and most people don't know they have it. We can intervene much faster if you simply get your lab work routinely.
I want to back that one up 100%, because think about it. If the fire in Paradise, my son's eyes were bothering him. He went in and had it checked, discovered he had elevated blood pressure, to stroke-like symptoms. Boom, he has kidney failure. Only discovered through an examination. Annual exams, I can't encourage enough.
Anything else you want to leave with?
Appreciation and respect for Maggie. I've known her since she was a kid. Of course, she's still a kid in my view, but the passion that she shows for solving this medical, and the role she plays is so important in helping tell a story. And she's been a great guidepost for me. And I just want to thank and acknowledge her for that.
Thank you. I'll add one more thing, Jared. And I think people get discouraged, and I'll speak specifically in Johnny's context. It's you discovered the heart valve. There's so many things this impacts that can delay transplant, but don't let it discourage you. Don't stay home. Don't not go get that fixed because you have one more thing. Don't stop sharing just because you have to go get something fixed, because everything in this process takes time. The testing, the evaluation, the scheduling, all of these things. And it's important to continuously run those parallel tracks while you're getting your valve fixed or whatever else. Continue to share your story.
Great.
I appreciate both of you being here and sharing your personal stories and educating us about this important topic. Thank you both.
Thanks, Jared, for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Capstone Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe and follow Jared Ash and Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Leave us a review and share this episode with a friend.